Mattress stitch is how you sew your knitting together neatly, and you can use it for side seams. You can use it for other seams as well as we go through. Okay, thanks Laureen, that's great. You can hear me now, fantastic. Okay, yay, thanks Debbie, sorry about that earlier. Okay, so it was just an introduction to what mattress stitch is for. It's for sewing up your knitting neatly, as I've said. Okay, so I'm Carol Ibbotson of coolwool.net. I am a knitting and crochet designer, tech editor and workshop trainer. And today this was talked about on my Facebook group, how to join seams using mattress stitch. So that's what I'm going to show. Traditionally you did it with back stitch to join your seams, and you sewed up like that sideways, and that's what my mum showed me. But this way you do it with the fronts facing you, and that's really useful for if you've got patterns on your colour patterns across your work, because you can match them up so much better. Okay, so you need a blunt needle. Here we go. There's a blunt needle. Has to be blunt for the magic to happen. And I happen to have a curved one. You don't have to have that, but in a minute you might see how that could help. Now I'm actually going to sew this up with a completely different colour. I'm going to use black, and I'm doing that A, so you can see what I'm doing, and B, so you can see that it actually doesn't really matter what colour you use because it's all hidden away. Okay, so you have to work mattress stitch 1 stitch in from the edge of your work. Now, knitters among you that have already done quite a bit, you know that a stitch is made up of a V. There's 1 stitch along the first row. There's a stitch along the next row. They're not nice straight stitches on the edge stitch, but you can see it as you go further in, the V stitches. Okay, so what we do first is we come from the back to the front on the left hand side. Now 1 whole stitch in. So go into that hole, pull your knitting about a bit if you need to. Really try hard not to catch any bits of the yarn as you go through. That's why we need a blunt needle, otherwise it won't work. Now you might notice I'm not starting right at the bottom of this piece. I would finish that off later. It's easier, and for a number of reasons which I'll tell you in a bit, it's actually preferable to start maybe 1 stitch up. So all I'm going to do to get it going is take this yarn through from back to front and leave a tail. Now I'm going to go over to my other piece. You've probably heard on previous tutorials that I've done that I'm a real advocate of blocking your pieces before you sew them together anyway, but I've just shown you the difference. This one's blocked, this one's not. So it's going to make it a little bit trickier for me on this side, but hey, we can manage it. But I hope I've got the point across about blocking. So over here, I'm going to pull this apart a little bit here. And I'm going to go from back to front 1 whole stitch in. Let's go into, let's pull this apart just a little bit more because I've got a little tail there that I don't want. Here we go. I'm going in the hole from back to front. Okay. Pull that through. Don't pull tight. You don't need to do that yet. Okay, so how does this work then? Well, we're now working a sort of weaving across, I suppose you could call it. So what you first need to do is go back in the hole that you came out of before on the left hand side. Don't catch any of the yarns if you can help it. This is, as I say, blunt needles. Got to be a blunt needle. And now just go upwards a bit and get back in there and scoop up a ladder. You'll have a ladder for a stitch that goes across the work. Across there between those two. Just scoop up 1 and pull through. I always start with just 1 on the left. You may have seen people using 2. Well, I'm going to use 2 in a minute, but I always start with 1 because I think it lines these 2 pieces up better. Now we're going to do a similar thing over on the right hand side. So we go in that hole, and this time I'm going to scoop up 2 ladders up that column. Okay, So now you might begin to see why I like to use a needle that's slightly bent, because it helps you scoop up those ladders. There we go. We're getting started now. So now, from now on, you always scoop up 2 ladders. So on both sides. So let's just get this out of the way. Make sure I go right back in that hole and up 2 without catching any of the yarn. Everybody hearing okay, guys, now? I really hope so. Now let's go back over here and in the same place and scoop up 2 again. And I'm going to keep doing that just for a little while longer. In at the same place without catching any yarn. Scoop up 2 in the same column. Back over to the piece that hasn't been blocked, which is irritating me, but there you go. It's proving a point. So back into that hole. Stretch the edge out a little bit and make sure you're going up 2. There we go. Right, now I can't wait any longer, guys. I'm going to show you the magic. This is where the magic happens. So when you've done a little bit like that, grab hold of each end gently and pull. Look at that. You've got 2 stitches next to each other, all the way going up there, that could have been knitted together. You can hardly see the join. You'll see a little bit at the beginning here, and that's fine because you're going to finish that off later with whatever's happening on the bottom. Either you're weaving it in or you're attaching an edging and so on. So that's it going up the side thing. Now if you want to carry on, just open up a little bit and go back to where you were, into that one. Pull it open so you can see exactly where to go in and how to go up 2 ladders. And back over to the other one. Into the same hole without catching anything. Up 1, 2 ladders there. Okay. I love Mattress Stitch. It was a game changer for me when I first discovered it. And you can adjust as you go along. And you can undo easily because it just pulls out. In fact, I'm going to do that now because I'm just going to undo that first little bit there. And I'm going to pull it out. So if you make a mistake, just pull it out. Like that. Now normally of course you'd use the same colour, but you don't actually have to. Let me show you this piece. I'm quite attached to this bit. This was the very first Mattress Stitch I ever did, and I've kept it. Upside down. I've kept it because it's not perfect, but I was so chuffed with it when I did it. And I did this with white yarn. You can see the end and the beginning there, whatever. And the back is really neat. You can't see the white there. The only time you can see the white is if you pull it sideways like that. Okay, so you literally use any colour you want. And that's handy if you've got multiple colours, obviously, on your work here. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to change colours or whatever if you think it's going to be seen, because it's not. Okay, so that's sewing from the side seams together. Now that works nicely if... By the way, I should say, when you get to the top, don't go right to the top. Leave a bit open, because this seam is likely to maybe join with a sleeve seam further up. So you don't want to go right to the top on every seam, because otherwise it'll get a bit too bulky. You'll have too much yarn going on there. So I always stop before the end and leave a long tail. Then when all the seams are done, you can just go back in and do that corner there and finish it off nicely without too much bulk. Okay, so that's side seams going up there. Now, what if, I can hear you thinking this already, you're thinking, Carol, they're nice and neat. They're obviously the same number of rows. What if you haven't got the same number of rows? Your tension was slightly different. Well, that's not a problem either. What I would do first is I would get the bottoms together, get the tops together, and maybe just pop a pin in there. And maybe a pin in the bottom, but we know we're going to start there anyway, but let's just do that. Line the edges up, add a pin as we go along. See, I definitely so want to block this now, but things like this where it looks even, you look like you've grabbed the same on the right as the left, just put a few pins in. And then as you work up, if you find you've got more rows on one side than the other, you can do a little bit of adjusting. You can go up 1 bar on one side and 2 on the other, and so on. So just keep looking how it's laying as you're going along, and if you need to fudge a little bit, you can do on one side or the other. So that's if you haven't got the exact same number of rows, which is probably quite likely to happen when you're doing a long cardigan or jumper or whatever. Okay, so that is side seams. Now, that's where most tutorials stop, but I want to show you a little bit more. I want to show you that you can actually use a form of mattress stitch to sew your shoulders together, but this time it will actually show, but it will be much neater potentially than how you would normally sew shoulder seams together. So imagine that is one shoulder seam there, and this one here is another shoulder seam. I'm going to sew them together. As I say, you normally do this maybe via back stitch, or maybe some of you even use short row shaping and 3-needle cast off and all those wonderful things, which I'd love to show on another day. But you can use a form of mattress stitch for this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is turn these this way on. And this time I am going to use the right colour. It's not exactly the same yarn, but it doesn't really matter. I am going to use the right colour because I want to show you how this works. What it actually does is create an extra row of stitches on the top of one or other of the bits. So let's go in. I'm still going to go in from back to front. And what I'm going to do is go in the middle of a stitch. Now I really hope you can see that. The stitches form V's either side. Let me use my other needle. Here's your V's. There's 1/2 of the V there and 1/2 of the V there, 1/2 of the V there. So I'm going up the centre of a stitch. Okay, I'll leave that hanging. Now on the other side, I'm doing not the opposite, but to keep everything in line, I'm going around a whole stitch. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to go in. See, there's the V. Remember, we're looking the other way this way. This is the cast off from the other side, which has been worked that way. So here's the stitch. So I'm going to go behind the whole stitch on that side. This is the way I tend to do it. Some people do this differently. You know, there's always lots of ways of doing these things in knitting. Come back to the other side. And again, go into that same hole, open it up, and go under 2 ladders again, if you like, which is the half of one stitch and the half of the next stitch. Now let's go over here and half. This time we're going around that whole stitch there. And so on all the way up. I'll just do a few and then show you what it looks like, because it's a bit different to the side seaming, because this is actually going to show at the end. So there we are, under 2. Back in the same hole. Let me just grab that one. There we go, and under 2. Just do a couple more, and I really get impatient with this because I always want to see it close up nicely. It's such a lovely thing to see. One more. There we go. Now I'm going to gently pull, and not as tightly as I did before. Oops, that's not the end. That's why that's not working. should have actually pulled a little bit earlier doing this because I want to, there we go, that's got it there. Now, not the neatest in the world, but does that look to you as if, you can do some adjusting later, there we go, let's just adjust that down, as if these are actually stitches going across your work to join it together. Let's turn it round. There, so that's one way you could use it. But remember, that's better, that's got it now. These stitches will show, so they do need to be in the same colour as what you're working. Okay, so that's one way. You might prefer to just sew, whatever you want to do, no problem. Let me pull this out here now. Now the other way that people don't often show you is how to join. Say this was the top of a sleeve here. So the sleeve been coming up this way, and this is maybe the side of a jacket, and maybe this is going to be this little sleeve folded in half, and it's got to be sewn like that to the top part of the jacket. Okay, so this is where we're sewing one way against another way. The direction of knitting there is left to right. The direction of knitting here is bottom to top. And so we're sewing stitches to rows or rows to stitches, whichever way you want to look at it. You can still use mattress stitch for this, but you may have to make some adjustments. So I'm going to go back to using the black because you can see it a little bit clearer. And say I wanted to start, let's assume this is sort of like a sleeve. I want to start that and I want to join it here, say. So again, I'd go into the middle of a stitch over here. There we go. I go across here, and this time, because we're starting straight off, you don't really need to do the single layer for the first one. That's just to line everything up. But we're now lined up. We know where we want to join it. Let's assume it's here. So I'm going to go under 2 there. 2 ladders. 1 stitch in from the edge again. Back into that same stitch over there and up 2. So to the other stitch. Halfway into the next stitch. Just make sure I'm not losing my tail. Okay, there we go. Now back across here, in and up 2. And I'm going to do 2 for a bit, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the adjustments you might have to make. Across to the left and up 2. So you can really see this sort of weaving thing that you're doing here. Across to the right, in at the same place. Whoops. In at the same place. I think I might have caught that stitch last time. So let's just stop and see if it works. If it doesn't work, you can just easily pull it out and do it again. I'm going to do one more on the left, in there and up there, 2. Okay, so let's have a go. This might not work because I think I caught my stitches, but let's see how we get on. Oh, yes, it has. So now you have neatly joined a column of stitches there to a row of stitches there. And you can do it all the way up so that you've always got the edge of the column there. Isn't that great? I love it. Okay, now what I need to point out to you is that you already know as knitters that the width of a stitch is not the same as the height of a row. So these won't always match up like they did nicely when you were doing side to side seams. So as you're going again, pin maybe that, if that was the top of the sleeve, pin that to the top. Make some adjustments as you go along so that you pick one. Don't ever pick more than 2 up in one go though, because you will leave a hole. So just adjust one side or the other to pick up 1 strand or 2 strands, depending on how it's going. But look at that. I love it. I think that's absolutely great. I used to hate sewing sleeves in, and this has done it for me now. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense. Sorry about the sound issues at the beginning. Is there anything else? Don't think so. I think I've shown you all the 3 different ways. So let's just recap. Side to side seams, 1 stitch in, end to end, cast off end to cast off end. You go through the middle of a stitch on one side and the side of a stitch on the other, and you just keep going like that. And then you've got horizontal and vertical pieces that can be sewn together using Mattress Stitch. And then finish off your ends when you're done, and everything should be so much neater. So thanks everybody. If you would like to join the Facebook group, some of you here, I can recognise your names from the group. It's Cool Wool Design, and I'll be picking something else to tell you about next week, hopefully. And I think that might be weaving in ends, but we'll see how we go. So don't hold me to that. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for your attention, and thanks for pointing out the sound, and I'll see you soon. Bye.